Hello, farmers, and welcome to another episode of The Harvest Season. My name is Al.
And my name is Jonnie.
And we're here today to talk about cottagecore games. Woo!
Woo!
I realised maybe we need a new name for the listeners. Like, are they still farmers? Or are they something
Yeah, they're definitely
else?
still farmers.
Okay, fine. Let's go with that.
I'm sure if they're not farmers, they will tell you on Twitter or via the Slack.
There have been some raging debates in the Slack about the changes to the podcast. I have no plan to change the name of the podcast. I still like the name. The name's still good. It's not specific to farming games. It doesn't exclude anything. I like it. So
we're not about to become the cottage season, because that...
No, it's just, no. Look, naming things is hard, and when you have a good name, don't change it.
I agree.
Like, you know, whoever looks at Meta and thinks that that's a better name than Facebook?
I'm sure people that get paid by Meta, which is a ever-decreasing number, feel that way.
Well, I'm sure most of them don't care, but anyway, in this episode, we are going to talk about Bloom. And Bloom is a Playdate game. Playdate is the console made by, what's the name of the company that makes it? Panic. That's their name, Panic, who started out, I believe, as a Mac software development company, and then made Untitled Goose Game, and then released the Playdate. So they do a lot of things, apparently.
And a lot of things that people really like, even if they're not that good. I am a... Untitled Goose Game was one of the most overhyped games of its year. It should have been called Goose Task Completer. It was like being a goose with a job. Like, you weren't an evil goose, which was the whole... Anyway, I don't want to get on my rant about Untitled Goose Game, but I do not like that game.
This is the anti-Untitled Goose Game episode then. I did not get it. Like, I just didn't really care. And it felt like it was trying to be an open world Goose Game, but there was very specific things you had to do. There wasn't the flexibility. Yes. It wasn't like you could do this in 10 different ways like you could in a lot of games. It was like, no, this is the puzzle, right? Just figure out the puzzle. And it just felt like a puzzle game with more faffing around at the edges.
Exactly. I think that is a great description of what that game was, and they just papered over it with like, but you're a goose, and it's like, okay, sure. It was fun in its concept, but yeah, I didn't really get it. I'm glad lots of people enjoyed it, and you know, I am always up for small companies having popular things, even if I'm not specifically liking them, because like if Untitled Goose Game hadn't been so popular, maybe we wouldn't have gotten the Playdate. You never know. I will second that opinion. And I will say, watching speedruns for Untitled Goose Game is a real trip. There's some weird stuff that happens in that game.
Does the honking slow you down or speed you up?
I think it slows you down. I actually think there is a small animation associated with the honk.
That's so sad, because if they'd made it speed you up slightly, it would have been the most ridiculous looking speedrun, just constantly honking.
That would be great.
It's like when you have games where like if you jump, it like slightly speeds you up for like 2 frames, so you're just constantly jumping through the game.
That would be amazing.
Speedruns are bizarre. They also made Firewatch, apparently. I didn't realize that. There you go.
Have you played Firewatch?
I haven't, because I think I talked about this in a previous episode. I'm not a huge fan of that style of game where it kind of just feels like you're watching a film and occasionally having to press a button. I don't like that.
You want a bit more game in your game?
Yeah, I don't like to gatekeep. I'm not saying it's not a game, and I'm not saying that people can't enjoy it, but it's not my kind of thing.
Right, you heard it here first, folks. Firewatch, not a game.
Anyway, so yeah, we're going to talk about the Playdate, which was made by Panic. And no, we're not going to talk about the Playdate. We're going to talk about Bloom, which is a game on the Playdate, which is made by Panic. So complicated. But we'll come to that when we come to it. Before that, we don't really have any news, which is weird because, like,
it's been a week since we recorded our last episode and there's no news, but there was news before the previous one, which is meant to be the quieter week. So I don't know why there was news that week and there wasn't this week, but anyway. But we do have 3 new games that I've found, which we can have a quick chat about. But first of all, Jonnie, what have you been playing?
So, like last week, I've been snapping up a storm. Marvel Snap just has taken over my life. New season is out. Zabu, the new season pass card, is very good. Been having a lot of fun with that. But I don't have too much else to say about Marvel Snap other than it's taken over my entire life, and I'm sure the listeners are sick of hearing about it. So in addition to that, I've been playing this brand new game. You might have heard of it, called Grand Theft Auto 5. I think it's only... It's probably like 10 years old at this point or something ridiculous. But
it will be very soon. It was 2013 it came out. I know it. Wow. I know exactly when it came out because it came out like 2 weeks after I started working, after I graduated uni in 2013. Because that's my first job was in Edinburgh, like literally 2 minutes walk away from Rockstar Studios, their offices in Edinburgh. So they had like this massive, like the whole side of their building was just this massive advert for GTA 5.
Amazing.
So yeah.
And I'm guessing it was a super appropriate and tasteful advert.
It could have been worse.
Okay, that's good. But I kind of fell off console gamings through a lot of the 2010s. There's a lot of good games that I kind of just missed. And I was looking for an open world game on some of the sort of post-Christmas sales, and I saw GTA 5 for like $20, and I was like, well, let's try this, and if it's bad, I can not keep playing it. And it's a really good game. Like, it's probably the best open world game that I've played in the last few years, and there's been a lot that have come out, and I think this is just significantly better.
So I will quickly say I'm not a huge fan of GTA, but we'll move past that. I don't, and it's not because it's open world. It's the style of. I mean, maybe it is the open world. I like some games where you can do anything, right? I like that in some games, but in some games it puts me off it. And it's hard to tell when it's going to put me off it and when it's not. And GTA really just feels like there's just everything and nothing at the same time, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description, because there's a lot of stuff in there and none of it is particularly fleshed out and it doesn't feel particularly great, but equally so much of that stuff is just, it's true side content in that doing it, like they have a tennis minigame, right? And the tennis minigame is terrible. I played it for like 5 minutes and was like, why would anyone spend any portion of their life playing this minigame? It sucks.
Yeah.
But it's fine, because as far as I can tell, nothing significant is locked behind your needing to play the tennis minigame. So if for whatever reason you really like it, you can do that. And if you don't, then the game isn't hiding content behind this silly little thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. It's just, I think it's, yeah. I think that what I look for nowadays is like a curated experience, and like that can happen in an open world game. Like I found the story through Breath of the Wild so much fun to go through, and that was reasonably structured, right? People seem to forget that it was reasonably structured, right? Just because they never paid attention to it, but it definitely was structured. It was very structured. Yeah, they had a quest log. They had a very specific, this is the main quest, and you could go through that. And I really liked having like that. This is, if you want to ignore everything else, that's fine. And so I just started following that, and I would get distracted by side quests along the way, which I absolutely love the idea of that, right? But I need that kind of through line. And I believe there is a main quest in GTA 5, but I, as far as I can tell, it's quite difficult to get started on that. I mean, maybe that's just how I jived with it. I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, no, I would say the main quest, like it's definitely there, and I think that's one of the things that's pulled me in. Is I think it's really strong. and the interactions between the three characters. That was kind of the part that put me off, because I was like, I kind of like playing as one protagonist and following their story.
Yeah.
And I was nervous about the switching between the three characters, but I actually think that's not that I would want every game to be like, here's our three protagonists through whom we're going to tell the story, but I think for this one game, it's really working to tell the story that they're trying to tell with the main quests.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Maybe if I tried it again, it would do it for me, but I'm not going to go back and play a 10-year-old game. I have plenty of other games to play now.
So what have you been playing?
Well, I too have been playing Marvel Snap. I do have one update on Marvel Snap, which is that I don't have Death yet, but I do have access to Death in that Death showed up in my store and I have pinned Death. So I just need to finish getting my
collector's tokens?
My collector's tokens so that I can buy it. So, yeah, we are nearly there. I no longer have to try and figure out how to get Death. I now just need to grind a little bit more, and I will have it probably within the next week or so. So I'm very happy about that.
It's good to have goals in life, and Death is one of those goals.
I've also been playing Sports Story. I think I mentioned this last episode. I am very much enjoying Sports Story. It is just as irreverent and mocking as Golf Story was, and it's doing some fun in different but similar ways. So yeah, fun. Cool. So, should we talk about some news?
News? It can't be news. It's the holidays.
Well, I guess, does it count as news? There's some new games that I've found. I mean, new is obviously quite a loose term. There's some games that I found for the first time. And so let's chat about them. So the first one is called Spellcorked. And this very definitely fits in the cottagecore rather than the farming game genre. But this is very appropriate for this episode. Another Playdate game. So I literally just found out about this last night. Not only is it a Playdate game, but it's included in the first season pass. So if you buy Playdate, you get this game for free. And this game, I'll just read the blurb as I always do for these games. In this laid-back magical gig economy crafting game, you are a recently graduated young witch trying to thrive in a digital age. With a bit of help and a lot of love, fulfill potion orders for people you never meet and try to get the best reviews you can.
As just a brief thing for a game, that's one that's really selling it to me. I feel like it hits all of the millennial dystopian future fantasy points that we want to be hearing.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see whether it does anything with the gig economy aspect of things, or whether that's just you have a side gig, right? I don't know whether they're
is that just good marketing?
Yeah, who knows? We'll find out. I will definitely play this. I'm charging up on Playdate as we speak because I hadn't really found a good game to play after Bloom. So this will definitely be the next one I pick up. It'll be interesting. I presume the crank will be used in the pestle and mortar. Is that what you call them?
Yeah, that's what it looks like from some of the images.
I'm still undecided as to whether the crank is just a gimmick with the Playdate or whether it's actually adding to the fun, but we will find out.
It's probably one of those things, right? It's like if a crank was on your Xbox, it wouldn't be great, but on something that's for a game that you play every few weeks, it's probably a fun little gimmick.
Yeah, that's true. Next, we have a game called Solar Punk. And before you start riffing on the name, I'm going to just read the blurb for this one as well. Solarpunk is a survival game in a technically advanced world of floating islands. Alone or together with your friends, you can construct buildings, grow food, craft gadgets, and hop on your airship to explore distant islands in the sky.
Yeah, I mean, if this is just a terrible name, just ignoring the fact that, Cyberpunk was a game that came out, and this is, audibly very similar. This is when you put Solarpunk into the Googles, you just get it's apparently a genre of art, and I don't know, just
Yeah, I'm not sure where the punk part of it comes in. Like, what makes it solar punk? Like,
so looking at the video, and I will say this game aesthetically looks really, really strong. It looks really cool, but they have like wind turbines and there's some like screens and technology stuff, so it kind of looks like they're trying to do the really embracing, I guess, it's farming, but there's still a lot of technology around, so I'm guessing that's what the punk is.
Yeah,
I'm not defending it. I'm just explaining it.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably fair, I guess. Yeah, it just feels a little bit yeah.
Yeah, I mean, while this game looks visually impressive, there's nothing that they've released yet that sort of really shows what this game is trying to do different. But release date 2024, so there's still time, I guess, is my feeling. And I like Sky Islands. I'm a fan of Sky Islands, so
just in general.
In general, like, I feel like any game that's like, yeah, we're doing the Sky Island thing, I'm like, cool, because that generally leads to interesting mechanics, and flying an airship between some Sky Islands for a farming simulator feels good.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I mean, it definitely looks good. I do so it calls itself a survival game. I wonder how much of it is actively kind of survival and how much of it is just you have to eat. Like, I'm not seeing anything really about, like, you know, mobs or anything like that. It just seems to be like a kind of Stardew-esque life sim, but you have to eat.
Yeah, I don't think people know what survival game actually means anymore, because a survival game seems to be like you walk around, pick up things, and then you craft with them, which is kind of missing the survival part of a survival game.
Yeah. It's like they read that Minecraft is a survival game and then they played creative mode.
Yes, that is how a lot of these games feel.
And the final game we're going to talk about before the main topic is Moonlight in Garland. Ugh, I hate that name. Speaking of bad names. The blurb for this one is a chill, open-ended life sim about finding your feet in the big city. Decorate your apartment, make new friends, grow too many houseplants, and love your city life.
Are you a houseplant person, Al?
I have tried to be. I have a Christmas cactus in my office, and that one is alive because cacti are really easy to keep alive, apparently. But I lack the enthusiasm to keep going is my problem.
Yeah, I've never really got into the houseplant craze, mostly because I'm really bad at remembering when to water things. And then when friends told me that, you know, well, you can manage it all through an app, it's like that's starting to sound like a job and not a hobby. So thanks, but I will keep my apartment stark and barren.
Yeah, I suspect I would be more into houseplants if I didn't have two kids who'd suck all of my energy.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I feel like a lot of people are having houseplants instead of children. Which, you know, if I had to choose, I would pick the houseplants.
I love my kids, but I think that it's a good decision to choose plants over kids.
Yeah.
No one will come and arrest you for neglecting your houseplants.
Well, no one will come and arrest you yet. I don't know about how I feel about Moonlight and Garland. Like, I like the idea of what they're going for. I just don't think that I'm that into the aesthetic look of this game, and I really feel like a lot of the cottagecore genre, like, I think how the games look are really important. And there's something about this art style that is really not connecting for me at all.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there's obviously a lot of nostalgia for old styles of games. And with your, like, Stardews and stuff, you got the kind of GB, NES, SNES style games. This seems to be jumping a little bit further into, like, Flash game style art, which to me doesn't really feel like something I want to go back to.
I think that's a great description of what this art is reminiscent of, and I think that's exactly, I don't have... My nostalgia is like, oh man, those games were terrible, but that was a fun time in my life. It's not like, oh, I really want to go back and play some old crappy Flash games.
Yeah, like I think there's a really good reason to go back to like really simple style of graphics, like your 8-bit graphic styles. I think there's an advantage to doing that, in my opinion. But there are some eras of gaming that I think we should never return to. Like, I don't want a game to ever look like the original Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 games, right? Like, leave them in the past.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Were the original Spider-Mans, were they those sort of comic booky style where...
No, they were 3D games. But very obviously low res.
Oh, the low polygon.
Yeah.
I think that's probably my concern with this game is it just looks dated. It doesn't give me a nostalgic feel when I look at it.
That's exactly it. It doesn't look retro, it looks dated. Yeah, you're right.
The other thing is like for a game like this, right, where you're a huge part of it seems to be upgrading your building and decorating your apartment and growing houseplants. And if those things don't look good, then how much do I really want to engage with that system?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's nothing... Personally, there's nothing really about the gameplay that's kind of selling me on it. It's not like, oh, that's a really interesting thing that they're doing there. Right, granted, there's not many games that really focus on the houseplants, but it's not really something that I'm like, oh yeah, I must have that.
I agree.
Like, houseplants isn't one of those things that like is so... It's like unobtainable. It's one of those things that you could absolutely do. Like one of these apartments that they have with the 10 houseplants in it, you could do that in real life pretty easily if you cared, right? With the same amount, if not less effort than the game.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel, from everything they've shown, and maybe this is wrong and this would be what would change my opinion, is if the houseplant growing was central to the story, but it almost feels like this is just an add-on decorative thing that feels totally unrelated to the story. Because I think there could be some interesting design space about a game that is all about growing houseplants in your house, right? That could lead narratively in some interesting directions, but I don't think that's what this game is trying to do.
Yeah, because there was Plant Daddy, which me and Cody talked about, and that felt different, and I'm not sure why. Like, it was the core gameplay loop was the growing the houseplants, and it almost kind of felt like it was meant to be educational. Whereas this is just trying to do the farm sim, life sim thing, but with houseplants, which, I'm not really that sold on. But listeners, if you want to play it, we'll have links to that and all the other games, all the 3 games that we talked about. They're all... So the first one, Spellcorked, is out now, I think. Solarpunk is coming in 2024 to Windows through Steam. And Moonlight and Garland is coming soon to Windows and Mac on Steam. So there we go. 3 new games if you don't have enough games already. So we're going to talk about Bloom. So just to recap, I got my hands on a Playdate a few months ago, which is, if you didn't guess from what we were talking about before, it's the little handheld gaming console with a crank on the side of it. Just quickly about the hardware. I love this thing. It's so nice and small, and it feels well made. It doesn't feel cheap. The case is really nicely designed. I'm really looking forward to getting there's a speaker dock you can get for it, but they've not released it yet. But it also charges it. I'm really looking forward to getting that. I think that might sit really nicely on my desk. Just as a piece of hardware, it's really good.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear, because I was looking at the Playdate, and that was one of my first questions, was about the quality of the console, because it's sort of in that, not quite the price of 3DS or something like that sort of price range. And you can always be, the first thought that I always go to is, is the quality going to hold up? So it's good to hear that it does. And maybe if you just describe sort of the visual style of the Playdate for people that...
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of, I think, meant to be reminiscent of the original Game Boy. So it's black and white screen, and it's obviously higher resolution. It's a pretty nice screen, much higher resolution than the original Game Boy. But it's meant to kind of evoke that style, I think. Although obviously there's many different styles of game, but just in terms of the screen, I think it's an e-ink screen. Although I'm not 100% sure about that. That might be me making that up. It certainly looks and feels like an e-ink screen. Yeah, I mean, just when I was like, I decided to take it out of the case just to double check that I am remembering it correctly, and it does feel it's definitely, it's made of plastic, but it's like nice plastic. It's not one of these like, it feels plasticky kind of plastics.
That makes sense.
What's the word I'm looking for? It's got the, how would you describe that? Like, it's not a smooth, slidey plastic. It's got a little bit of texture to it, which is kind of nice to hold in the hand.
Yeah, because I remember some of those, like back in the late 90s, there would be these sort of like game console-y things that you could buy. They would have like Tetris and Snake and a few games like that on them, and they were, $20, $30 or whatever, and they were always the really cheap, like slippery plastic, that really sort of glossy stuff that would slip out of your hand and fall apart in the smallest bit of contact. So you're saying it's definitely not that.
Yeah, I'm comparing it right now to the Game Boy Advance SP, and it feels comparable, if not slightly nicer than that. It's a nicer feel on the plastic. It feels more sturdy, like the SP, which the SP I consider kind of one of the better Game Boys in terms of how it felt in the hands. Not in terms of necessarily what's the word, like the layout of buttons or anything like that. Just in terms of like the actual feel of the case and the plastic and everything. And it feels nicer. It feels more premium than that. And I think therefore probably nicer than kind of most of the DSs. I'd say maybe like the later 3DSs feel a bit more sturdy, but that's probably about it. Like it's pretty good in terms of its overall feel.
Nice. So I guess that's the Playdate, and I think they're currently doing pre-orders. If someone's listening to this and thinks that that's something that they would be interested in, but I think that's how they're distributing it. They're kind of just continually doing a pre-order sort of style system.
Yeah, they've not managed to catch up on their orders yet. They opened up pre-orders in July 2 years ago, July 2021, and they've I think they've fulfilled most of the original pre-orders, and yeah, they're estimating early 2023 for current pre-orders. What exactly early means, I don't know, but that's presumably talking first half is what they're expecting. And your pre-order, because apparently you can cancel it for a full refund if you do it at any point. So that's nice. But yeah, pre-orderable. Does it count as pre-order at this point? It's purely just a back order by now, right?
Yeah, but back order doesn't sound as interesting. That's why this is how we end up in a world where we have like pre-alphas and things like that, because certain words sound fun and exciting, and so we have to throw those words in everywhere.
Yeah, you're just ordering.
Yeah,
buy one and you get it in a few months.
Yep. Cool. So maybe if we start to talk about Bloom, the actual game, do you want to maybe give an overview of what you're trying to, or what you're trying to do in Bloom? Yeah,
so Bloom is a game. So I would call it kind of narrative game. So it's primarily about the story, but there is some farming gameplay in that. So you start out and it's you find out that you've just left home. You are pretending to go off to college to your parents, but you've actually renting an apartment and a shop with a plot on top of the building where you can grow your flowers. And there's kind of two main gameplay elements to it. The first one being the growing of the flowers. It's relatively simple in that you buy a seed, you plant it, and then you water it, it grows, and you harvest it. And when you harvest it, you automatically sell it. So you know the aspect of you have a shop and that exists, but you don't really ever do anything with it. I don't think you ever actually see it. You just kind of talk about it in the other part of the game, which is the text messages. So the story is all through text messages. You have a phone which you can access to do a number of things, the main one being the text messages, and you'll get periodically messages from people. You have your parents, you have your landlord, you have your partner. They never really kind of go into a huge amount of detail as to how they would refer to each other, so I'm just going to say partner at this point. But they, and you just kind of go through this story through those text messages. So you receive a message from, you know, one of your parents or from your partner, and then you can reply, and they might reply straight away, or they might reply, and it's real time in so much as like each plant takes a certain amount of real time to do, but it's not like days, right? So one of them, I think the shortest one is maybe like 2 hours or something. So you plant it, and then 2 hours later you can harvest it. And the texts are, I think, the same, but it's kind of hard to know. You just kind of, it's very much designed as like a put down and pick up game. So like you might play it for 5 minutes. Yeah.
I have a question about the sort of pick down and pick up element, and I guess the question is, does it work? Because a lot of games that go for that, they're much more about, you know, daily interactions or do this every day and things going in real time. But this is more using that as a mechanic to sort of, I assume, naturally break up and tell the story of the game, so you can't just sit down and consume it all at once.
Yeah. I think it works really well. Now, I normally don't like real-time games. I don't like this kind of thing. You know, it was kind of the thing that was most frustrating to me about Animal Crossing was that real-time aspect of some of them. But I really liked it. I thought it worked really well. And I think part of the reason it works really well is because essentially while you're playing this game, like it's a dedicated console, right? You're not really playing multiple games on this console at one time. And so having this is the game that I'm playing on this console for the next couple of weeks, and it just kind of sits on your desk, and then you pick it up and you see, oh, have I got any plants to harvest? Have I got any text messages? And you put it down. Like, you know, you're playing for at most 5 minutes at a time, but there's almost always something there, even if you're just kind of, you know, just checking your text messages again or whatever. And I think it works pretty well for that sort of game. I don't normally like that kind of game, and I actually thought that worked really well.
Nice. So what else is going on? Because from the sounds of things, growing the plants is relatively hands-off. There's not a lot that you're doing.
I mean, I think that's kind of the game in general. There's not a lot you're doing just overall, right? So the planting, as I said, is very simple. You plant, you water, and then like 2 hours or 6 hours later, depending on what plant you use. Or I think the later ones, I'm pretty sure took 2 days to grow, which becomes fun later on in the game. But that's basically all you do with that aspect of things. I have no idea if there's kind of every 30 minutes there's a new text message or whatever. I don't know how that works because it's hard to know, right? Like I was just picking it up every couple of hours and seeing what was there. And most of the time that I picked it up, there was a new text message. So another part of the story. I mean, those are really the main parts of the game. There's other aspects in terms of like your secondary game loop where you're obviously you're making money to do something, and your main things you're doing are paying off your rent, which it says rent, but really I feel like it feels more like paying off a mortgage than rent. Like you pay 1,000 and then your next payment is like 10,000 and then your final payment is like 20 million yen. You know, it's like, it's not cheap. So I don't know what rent goes up that much that quickly.
I know a certain raccoon from a game that you just referenced that feels like maybe it's
That's true. That's very true. But that he does not, to his credit, he doesn't pretend it's rent. It is a mortgage. And you don't have to take the upgrades if you don't want to. Like he is obviously a dirty capitalist, but he does at least give you the choice. In this game, you don't have that choice.
He's at least an honest dirty capitalist. Transparent dirty capitalist.
Transparent would probably be a better choice of words. Yeah. When you pay your rent, in heavy air quotes, it unlocks some more plots in the garden. So I think you start off with maybe 6, and then you kind of unlock them in blocks of 3 or 6 as you go along until you've got quite a lot. I think it tops out at, what would that be, 28, something like that. I don't actually have the game in front of me because my Playdate had run out of battery, so I'm charging it just now. Oh, it's up now. I have new games available. I wonder whether that other Playdate one is on there. I'll take a look at that later. So yeah, you pay your rent, you upgrade more, and then eventually you can pay off the rent. And I mean, that's really it. Like, it very definitely feels more like a narrative game that uses the farming to progress the narrative rather than a game where the primary point is to farm. Like, you're farming and making money to pay off your rent and progress the story, the story is really good in this game. And I'll touch on that in a minute, but if you have any more questions on the mechanics of things.
No, let's hit the story, because I feel like that's really the crux of this game.
Yeah, so obviously I do not want to spoil this game for people. So if you think you might want to play this game, I'm not going to go into like the end game story, because it actually is really good and it was really fun to go through. This story is a story about relationships, and it's actually multiple stories kind of interweaved. So Midori, your character's name, Midori has, as I said, she's lying to her parents about what she's doing. They think she's gone to college. She's actually opened up this flower shop. She also has a partner who is aware of what's happening and lives nearby, but they seem to only ever talk through text. There are actually some points in the story where clearly something has happened between text messages, like you've gone to talk to someone or you've done something, and you only get kind of hints about what's happened, which I really like actually with the way they've done it. They've not kind of over-explained everything, because that's not how somebody would do communication anyway, and you just learn what has happened through hints of what they were saying in the conversation, which is really nice. Yeah,
that sounds really great. And I think one of the things that sounds appealing about this game is the fact that it's obviously a flawed protagonist, or a flawed character that you are playing, with the lying
Absolutely.
To the parents aspect. And that's not something we really see in cottagecore games, because often the protagonist is just an empty vessel for you to put yourself into. So that sounds like a really fascinating space to explore.
Yeah, no, it's really nice, and I don't want to say too much more, because like I think it's really worth going through the story if you want to. But yeah, the point is you're just kind of talking through. There's a couple of other characters as well. There's like your neighbor and landlord, and you have a different relationship with each of them. So obviously your relationship with your landlord is much less consequential than your relationship with your partner or your parents. And then the relationship with your neighbor and the relationship with your other friend, I think that's all the characters are obviously kind of somewhere in the middle. And it's really nice seeing how they're all different, but there's conflict in all of them, as there is in every relationship in life, but they're different. And I think it's not just the protagonist that's flawed in this game. I think everybody's flawed in this game, and you can see but you can also see why everybody's doing what they're doing. Even if you're like, oh no, don't do that, you're like, oh, but I can see why they're doing that, but also we all know this is going to go wrong, like you do in so many things, but it's totally human.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds amazing. And I think I said to you after the best farming game of the year that listening to you talk about Bloom, and I was all ready for the argument that this should have been farming game of the year last year. And I think this conversation's really sort of like embedded that for me, because I personally really like a really well told story. I'm not sure if you ever played the mobile game Florence.
I did not.
It was God, I really don't want to look up when it came out because it was probably a few years ago. Oh, it's only 2018. Okay, that's not so bad. And apparently it's on Switch now. But it's a very short. It is a narrative game, right? The gameplay aspects to it are really light, but it is a really nice story about a relationship. And it's sort of getting similar vibes from this game, is that it's, just a story about relationships and sort of being told from one person's perspective, right? So you're not really getting you're not seeing what the parents are thinking, for example, throughout the story.
Yeah, no, that's very definitely what it is. There are choices in your communication in this game, but they don't matter. It's basically just how you word something, and someone might react slightly differently to it, but it doesn't change the story, I don't think.
Doesn't change the entire outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
How long did it take to get through? And I realize that's kind of a weird question to ask, but sometimes these games can go on a bit long.
It definitely didn't feel overly long for the story. I will say, if you want to complete the final rent payment and have everything 100%ed, it felt a little bit like this number's too high to reach in a comfortable amount when there's nothing else left to do. So I felt like I reached the conclusion. Well, I definitely reached the conclusion of the story quite a bit before that final one. But if you're fine with just kind of ignoring that, then it didn't feel too long. I feel like it was maybe about 2 weeks of playing on and off to get through the story. And that's maybe playing a total of 15 or 20 minutes in a day. Obviously, it would take longer if you're not kind of on top of things. Obviously, I was near the end, I was setting timers for how long it should take my plant to grow, right? I was, what I'm like, I can't just kind of let things be. And then it was maybe another week of farming and harvesting to pay off the final loan. Which I'm just going to say now, if you don't want absolutely no spoilers, turn off now. You don't need to do that for the story. It's completely unconnected. It doesn't matter. Only do it if you're an absolute completionist. If you just care about the story, you do not need to do the final rent payment. Nothing matters. Yeah, so maybe about 2 weeks and then about another week to get the 100%.
Nice. I realize we haven't talked about the crank yet. What's the crank for?
So that's the thing I realized I hadn't mentioned. That's the last mechanic thing that I forgot to mention. The crank in this game is very definitely a gimmick. So the only thing there's two things you do in the crank, one of which is less gimmicky and one is more. So the crank is used in the text messages to scroll back and forward in the messages. A wee bit gimmicky, but it's quite a nice way to kind of scroll through, because obviously it doesn't have a touch screen or anything like that. It feels nice and smooth. And could it have been done in a different way? Probably, but it's kind of fun.
I'm not going to lie, that sounds kind of great. I don't know why, but something about that sounds really appealing.
Yeah, I will say it's really annoying because there's one menu that the scrolling doesn't work in, and it's the only menu in the game it doesn't work in, and it's really annoying why it doesn't. I understand why it doesn't, because it's the shop, and you want to make sure that you're pressing on the right thing. They don't want you to accidentally scroll past and accidentally buy something, but I feel like it could have been done. Anyway, not important. The other thing, which is entirely gimmicky, is, and this will lead me into the one flaw I find with this game, the one annoying thing with this game. So your game is basically on 2 floors. You've got your apartment floor and the roof where you grow, and you use the crank to move between the floors. You go in a lift and you go between the 2 floors. Completely gimmicky, completely unnecessary, but still fun to do.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm really hoping that the elevator is one of those old hand crank style elevators.
It's not very high fidelity. It's not that visible. You just kind of see a box.
So you can definitely imply that it is.
You absolutely could imply. If you want to believe that's what it is, you can absolutely believe that's what it is. But it does lead me to my one really annoying thing. So I mentioned most of the stuff is done through your phone. You open up the phone and you've got different apps for text messages and the shop and paying your rent and stuff like that. you can only open your phone when you're in your apartment. You can't do it when you're on the roof. And it's such a small, stupid thing that I shouldn't be annoyed about, but it annoys me so much, the fact that I'm on the roof and I harvest all my flowers, and then I have to go down to my apartment to buy new seeds to then go back up to the roof to plant them all again. It's so frustrating.
I just hear that sounds like a good life lesson, you know, if you're outside in the world, don't be using your phone, stay off your phone, engage with the world around you. No, that does sound.
I don't need a game
annoying.
Judging me like that. I mean, it really isn't that frustrating. I overworked it. It's not that really stupid. It's like that one case where it's annoying. Most of the time it doesn't matter. It's fine. And I kind of get it. It's like, oh, you know, you don't want to be like, it can be raining up there, whatever. You don't want to be standing up there on your phone or whatever. But it just feels a little bit frustrating sometimes.
And it's funny, right? Because from everything that I've heard you say about this game, it sounds very close to perfect. And sometimes those really little minor things that in most other games you'd be like, oh, well, that's annoying, but I wouldn't even mention it. But it can take a game that's close to perfect and just be like, oh, I just really wish they'd nailed this one little thing.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Do you have anything else to say about Bloom?
Yeah, I've got one thing. They have an accessibility mode, which is always good. Just want to shout that out. If you can't use the crank, you can turn on the accessibility mode and you can use the D-pad instead of the crank for those things, which is always good that they've actually thought about these things.
Nice. Would you recommend people buy a Playdate to play Bloom? Asking for a friend.
That's a really, really hard thing to talk about. I think that if you had been considering buying a Playdate, this is your sign to buy one. This game is absolutely worth it. If you can't afford a Playdate, obviously don't buy a Playdate. This is not a games console that you need, right? This is a games console you want, not a games console you need. Do not buy this unless you were wanting to buy one because you have too much money, right?
Or you have an addiction to buying game consoles.
I do. I have all of the games consoles. That's not true. I don't have an Xbox Series X. I don't have all the games consoles. I also still don't have a Sega SG-1000, mainly because like the cheapest one I could find just now is £500, and that's a lot of money for a 25-year-old games console.
I don't know what a Sega SG-1000 is, so I am now Googling it. And I'm looking at it, and I still have no idea what this thing is.
It was the predecessor to the Sega Master System, which was the predecessor to the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis for the North Americans out there.
Old consoles are like my first console was a PS2, so you know that tells you when.
Wow. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, great game. It only costs $10, and you can buy it from itch.io. You have to sideload it on, but this is another thing I didn't mention about the Playdate. It has great support for sideloading. So you download the game package, you go onto the Playdate website, click on your console, and you drag it onto the browser and it will download it onto your thing. You don't have to connect it to your computer. You just have to have it on the internet and it will do everything for you. It is such a nice experience, and it's so nice when you have a company that doesn't just want to lock you in and will give you the ability to put your own games on it. It's so good because it's not just like the kind of Android way of doing things. I was like, oh, well, you have to connect it to your computer, or you have to get the file onto the machine first, and then you have to disable the security, and then you have to... No, it works so nicely. It's really good.
And I think developers that are doing that sort of stuff are worth supporting, right? Because it's...
Absolutely.
Like you say, it's just not that common, and so it's really good to hear that they've taken what sounds like a relatively open approach to what could otherwise have been a very niche little console.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a couple of games I've played that they have in their... Like, so they don't have like a shop you can buy things on the console. You have the seasons of games. So currently they're doing season 1 of the games. If you buy a Playdate, you get season 1. And like every month, I think they give you 2 new games. But that will run out at one point, and then you'll have to pay for the season 2. So there's no current, I believe they are planning to do an app store, but they haven't done it as of yet. But yeah, the sideload, if you go onto your account on the Playdate website, it's one of like the 4 main things you can do to sideload. It's not hidden or anything. It's like very visible. And it's clear that they're like, you know what? Itch does a good job. Like, you know, you can upload anything onto Itch and sell it. It's just supports files, right? So you just go, here's the file, and they're I don't know whether they are just like, well, they're doing better than us at this, why not just use it? But hopefully they'll continue to do that, even if they do put an app store on as well. So yeah, it's good.
Very cool. Very cool. So that's Bloom.
Bloom. Go play it if you have a Playdate. Or, yeah, if you have a Playdate, you should absolutely already be buying this game. It's 10 quid. Go buy it. If you have a Playdate, you have the money to buy this game. It's 10 quid. Go buy it.
Also, if you have a Playdate, what else are you playing? Like, there's not, like, tons of games for this thing yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a big market of them on Itch. I keep seeing new games pop up. None of them really kind of pique my interest, but yeah, I think they even have maybe they don't have I thought Itch had they've got a tag for Playdate, so you can search through all the Playdate stuff, and like I'm seeing quite a lot. 1, 2, 3. Like I'm just scrolling and it just keeps going. Like I've seen at least 40. Now we're at 50, 60. 70, like there's at least 100 games on Itch for this thing already.
That is way more than I would have expected.
Absolutely, yeah. And some of them will probably be terrible, but some of them are Bloom. So,
in fact, exactly one of them is Bloom.
At least one of them. There might be more.
That is a factual statement.
Anyway, let me know if you have also played Bloom and what you think about it. I can't be the only person listening to this podcast that has played it because it's such a good game.
Or if listening to Al's description made you think of, this sounds like another game, tell us about those games, because there's a lot of these sorts of games that I feel go under the radar, and I love these sorts of games. So if you know about one, let us know.
Absolutely. Someone in the Slack was asking whether I take suggestions for games. Of course I do. Give me your suggestions. Like, we're now a weekly podcast. We need more game suggestions. Actually, I'm joking.
Yeah, there's only 30 games coming out this year. we're really struggling for content.
It's okay. I can see at least 2 other Playdate farming games here in this list. There's one called Factory Farming, which sounds interesting.
That could go really wrong.
Well, I'm hoping it's a good take on things. Oh my word! There's one. This is not a farming game, obviously, but there's one where you know the like flash anime of the girl spinning the leak.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yep,
they've got that, and you can spin the leak using the crank. Which is free. That's free. Amazing.
So we know what Al is doing after this recording.
Amazing. And there's a music box and an ocarina, a stacking game. There's loads of games here. They're not all farming games, obviously. Oh, it's a fishing simulator.
Oh my god, I'm now just going
that one's
pre-order a Playdate.
Oh, there's a trolley problem game. This is what I love about stuff like the Playdate. It's just like, it just makes people go, what about these crazy ideas I've got in my brain? And everyone goes, yes, give me those crazy ideas.
And then sometimes they do those crazy ideas and people look at it and go,
yeah,
maybe not everybody needs to be encouraged.
Anyway, so tweet at me, either personally or the podcast, with your other suggestions or why you love Bloom. You can find me on Twitter at the ScottBot. Jonnie hates the internet, so you can hear him on the podcast occasionally. You can find the podcast on Twitter at THSPod. You can email us from our website, harvestseason.club, where you can also find links to everything related to the podcast, including our Patreon, where you can monetarily support the podcast and get access to the Slack, where there's been a lot, as I said earlier, a lot of discussion about the changes to the podcast, and also access to our bonus episodes of the podcast. There should be one coming out soon. I haven't decided exactly when. It's a little bit more flexible now because I used to just release them on the off weeks, on the Wednesdays, same time as the podcast, but we don't have them anymore. So I need to decide when they're coming out, but there will be an episode coming out soon. I think that's everything. Thank you, Jonnie, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, listeners, for listening. And until next time,
have a
good harvest.
The Harvest Season is created by Al McKinley, with support from our patrons, including our pro farmers, Kevin and Stuart. Our art is done by Micah the Brave, and our music is done by Nick Burgess. Feel free to visit our website, harvestseason.club, for show notes and links to things we discussed in this episode.